This podcast is presented by Regions Bank. You're chasing your goals, and it's up to you how you want to get there. Let Regions Bank coach you with financial tips that fit your everyday grind. Visit regions.com/next-step to learn more. Regions, member FDIC.
Hello and welcome to the AP Top 25 College Football Podcast. I'm Ralph Russo, college football writer with the Associated Press. The playoff has been set. The bowls have been set. So we will do our bowl preview. And as has become tradition, we want to preview all the games except the playoff. We'll save the playoff for later. And to do that, I bring in Matt Brown from The Athletic. Matt is an editor with The Athletic's national college football content and an AP Top 25 poll voter. He knows the sport deeper and wider than any other person I know. The perfect person to hit on all these teams from all these conferences and all these bowl games that maybe you're not too familiar with. We will hit every game, at least for just a fleeting moment. Thanks for listening to the AP Top 25 College Football Podcast. You can find us on Apple Podcasts and at Westwood One Podcast, just about anywhere you find your podcast. Please subscribe, and if so inclined, give us a good review. It helps college football fans find us, and it helps us find more college football fans, and away we go. Joining me on the podcast this week, and it's the day after college football's Selection Sunday. We are recording before the Heisman Finalist will come out, but our focus here with Matt Brown, editor, college football from The Athletic, also AP college football poll voter. No one knows the sport better than Matt. He knows all the nooks and crannies, so he is the best person I can think of to bring on when we have to talk about 37 bowls involving 74 teams, and we're not going to talk about the playoffs, so I'll put those 4 teams aside. But when you have to get into the nooks and crannies of college football, nobody's better than Matt Brown. Thank you so much, Matt, for doing this with me. And this will be, I think, year 3 we've done this little exercise. Yeah, appreciate having me. I don't know if anybody loves bowl season more than I do, so thankfully we have another. I don't know if it's the best slate we've ever had, but usually sometimes the weakest matchup surprises end up being the best. Sometimes the most minor bowls end up being the best. So who knows? I always love this time of year. Yeah, you never know when you're going to get a Cheez-Its bowl moment, right? Exactly. The bowl that's so good it's bad, it's so bad it's good, and things along those lines. But we can touch on that for just a second. Just as you said, like I love this time of year. I am not there are too many bowls guy. Never. They're all fine. I love them all. I love all my children equally. But I must admit, when I was going home late last night after packing up for a long day and I was taking the subway, actually came into the office to do some work yesterday, and I was looking at my printout of the bowls, and I found myself going, not a lot of them that are really jumping out to me. And again, I will watch as many as possible, but I felt the same way as you, that maybe this slate, for whatever reason, wasn't quite popping this year. No, that's how I kind of felt. Even sometimes there's usually a couple like group of 5 versus group of 5 matchups that really stand out. Like, oh, that's going to be a really fun game. And I don't necessarily think many of them did, unfortunately. And the same goes. I don't think it's a particularly compelling New Year's Six slate. Like, we're not going to talk about the playoff, but the playoff games sound fantastic. Like, it's a great playoff. The New Year's Six, just with all the tie-ins, it's probably not the ideal year of bowl matchups, I guess I'll say, even though I will try to watch every game if I can. Yeah. I think there was just a handful of games where you found yourself, more than that, again, with all the conference tie-ins, it sort of locks teams in, and you find yourself thinking, oh, if they could have only flipped those 2 teams, or why did this team have to go here? Maybe we could have, sort of manipulated a better matchup. That is not built into the system, so we end up having what we have. So we are going to start at the top. We are going to try to hit every game. We will try to go quickly through some minor games and spend a little time on some major games, but you never know. Sometimes we just decide that a minor game is a major game, and maybe we go off on the minor game a little longer, but we're going to try to do this relatively organically, and we will very much start right at the top. Cool thing this year is that the bowls start a little earlier because there's kind of a compact schedule this year as far as the regular season was concerned. So instead of that Saturday where there's 6 or 7 games, there's actually a couple of them the day before on December 20th on the Friday. And if this is not a day drinking gambler's delight game, the Bahamas Bowl kicking off at 2 p.m. on a Friday afternoon, Buffalo and Charlotte, that is all kinds of day drinking, I think.
I loved when this game was Christmas Eve afternoon. It was like the perfect wrapping presents game for me.
It was a good
wrapping
wrapping presents game.
But I'm not going to complain here because this is like everything I love about bowl season. Buffalo and Charlotte playing in front of like 100 people in the Bahamas at 2 p.m. on a Friday. Why is this happening? I don't know, but I'm going to watch, and it could be fascinating. Like it's actually a pretty fun matchup. I mean, two rising star coaches. Will Healy's done a fantastic job at Charlotte. They're in their first bowl game. They've only been playing FBS football since 2015. And Buffalo lost so much talent from last year, but Lance Leipold's done a great job there and got them back to a bowl. So it's certainly not two traditional powers here. Charlotte has barely existed as a football program, but it could actually be a pretty fun game. And Jarrett Patterson, the running back from Buffalo, is a really good player. So I think this is actually a pretty solid matchup here.
Yeah, I'll throw out a name if you're one of these. If you watch bowl games with an eye toward the draft, Alex Highsmith, a defensive lineman from Charlotte, has 21.5 tackles for loss. That's more than Chase Young. I know Chase Young has played more games. He played one more game than Chase Young, but nonetheless, that's more than Chase Young. And he's a guy who could be an NFL prospect. So I don't know if I'm going to make you pick the games. If you want to pick the game, that's fine. You're going to pick Buffalo. Okay. All right. So the Bahamas Bowl will be a lot of fun just because of the time it is. And again, you should sneak out of work early or fire this up online to end your day at the office because the Christmas break is going to be weird this year. Christmas, like I could see people deciding to start their Christmas break on that Friday, even though Christmas is not till the next Wednesday.
Right. What a perfect way to start it. What an excuse. I mean, it's just perfect.
People will actually start convincing themselves that, like, that's the Christmas weekend, even though Christmas is not until Wednesday. There's another bowl game that night, and I'm going to give you the sponsor names and everything because the sponsor names are high comedy, too.
We just neglected the Bahamas Bowl sponsor, by the way.
It's still the Makers, right? The Makers Wanted?
The Makers Wanted Bahamas Bowl, which is... What's the name of the industrial park? It's Elk Grove Village, Illinois. Elk Grove Village, Illinois. So that is still the bowl game sponsored by a random town in Illinois.
It's a bowl game sponsored by an industrial park in the Bahamas. Not
Correct.
that the industrial park is in the Bahamas, but the bowl game itself is in the Bahamas. It's really all kinds of random.
It's like a great sponsorship day here, that first Friday.
So the second one is the Tropical Smoothie Cafe Frisco Bowl. Frisco being Frisco, Texas. And that one has Utah State against Kent State. Kent State back in the bowl. Utah State, a lot was expected of their quarterback, Jordan Love. Didn't quite hit this year, but you have Utah State and Kent State, and what do you think here?
Yeah, Kent State's an underrated story this year. Sean Lewis taking them to a bowl game. This is only their second bowl game since 1972, which Don James and I believe Nick Saban at the time would be there. And They went to that random bowl game in 2012. They had the one good season under Darrell Hazel, and that's basically been it. They've won 4 games the last 2 years combined. So to get to 6-6, pretty nice turnaround for Kent State. The MAC, there's a lot of parity this year. Kent State ended up kind of emerging and being a good story. I don't know if they can beat Utah State, which hasn't, Jordan Love hasn't quite had the season expected, but Utah State's still a pretty good team out of the Mountain West that contended in that conference, went 6-2 in the Mountain West. So let's see. Jordan Love is a draft prospect as a quarterback, so we'll see if he can go out on a high note. That's always something we're watching for in these bowl games.
Yeah, they have talked about the idea of Love. He is a senior, and he could conceivably grad transfer after this year as opposed to jumping straight to the NFL. We'll see how that plays out, but you're right. You were kind to the MAC in calling it parity.
Yes.
I would call the MAC just down this
Interesting.
year. Yeah, we're just trying to be very nice to the MAC because we like the MAC. But the fact of the matter is Utah State generally has a roster that is built more than a MAC school, especially a mid-tier to lower-tier MAC school. So this probably sets up well for Utah State if they are focused, because Kent State will certainly be really excited to be playing in this game. I don't want to completely, even though we don't really find too much time to watch FCS games, but I don't want to completely neglect the Celebration Bowl, which is on December 21st, and it's become, again, another tradition where you have the two FCS, sort of the Black College National Championship game, right? SWAC against the MEAC, Alcorn State against North Carolina A&T. We all discovered Tariq Cohen a few years ago at North Carolina A&T in this game. I don't know if you have even glanced at this, but will you watch it? Glance at these teams, I should say, but will you watch it?
I will probably watch it because that's what that day is for.
Yeah.
I don't know much about the teams. I'm sorry to say.
That's okay. As a guy who spent a lot of time in Mississippi and covered some of the SWAC schools and has actually been to Alcorn State, and you cannot get more remote than Alcorn State, I will pick Alcorn State. Next one is the New Mexico Bowl, which has had a history of bizarreness. Maybe not as much lately, but it's a bowl that has not been around for very long, but has produced some very odd results. This year it is Central Michigan and the revived career of Jim McElwain against San Diego State and Rocky Long, who just keeps on trucking with the Aztecs.
Yeah, I know the MAC is down. Yes, it has been down this year, but credit to Central Michigan for taking advantage. It's a team that went 1-11 last year, which was really an anomaly because that's been a consistently solid program. At least they consistently go to bowl games. But McElwain inherited a 1-win team, turns it around, wins 8 games, wins the division. But tough matchup against a really good San Diego State defense. San Diego State this year, kind of before the season made a show of, hey, we're going to spread the field more, but the offense has been just as problematic. But they play a really good defense still, and you think that gives them an advantage here against Central Michigan. I would like San Diego State's defense to carry the day here.
So Hugh Freeze is back on his feet after starting the season in various ways incapacitated, but yet still coaching. And I hate to make fun of that, but you know what? It was kind of funny to see him, and again, in his various contraptions used to coach from. He did a pretty good job. And the former Ole Miss coach is at Liberty, and he's got Liberty in a bowl game against Georgia Southern, the only team to knock off App State this year. And you can make an argument that if it was not for Georgia Southern, App State might be in the Cotton Bowl. I know AAC folks don't want to hear that, but it's been quite a year.
True.
It's been quite a year for App State, and Georgia Southern managed to beat them. Liberty lost to Rutgers, I believe. That's correct. Yes. So, Liberty has won 7 games. They won a couple of FCS games, but nonetheless, they are here, and they're playing a triple option team. And what you got on Liberty?
This is like one of the strangest bowl eligible teams ever, because if you look at their schedule, they had to win 7 because they played 2 FCS teams. They played Hampton, they played Maine. They also played New Mexico State twice in that home and home again.
That's right.
So
they do that
4 of their wins
against
FCS teams and 2 against New Mexico State, which, with all due respect to the Aggies, is basically like an FCS team at this point in terms of ability. They had a rough season. So, their wins were again, and they also beat UMass, who was just a complete disaster this year, gave up more points than any team in FBS history. They did beat Buffalo, though. So we'll give them credit for the win over Buffalo. Early in the year, Buffalo got better after that, but still a pretty good win. But I think obviously Hugh Freeze did a nice job there. They're pretty good. Georgia Southern did beat App State, though, and one of my favorite stats, Georgia Southern last year, do you know how many interceptions Georgia Southern threw last year, Ralph?
Last year is in 2018, not this season, but last year. Last year, Georgia Southern probably threw, they were a triple option team, so they probably threw, 4, maybe 3, 5 tops?
They threw 0 interceptions last year.
They did, okay.
You know how many interceptions they've thrown this year? The answer is also 0. So
they haven't thrown an interception in 2 years.
Without interception. Now, they don't pass a lot, but they do pass. And let's see, they have 136 pass attempts this year, which is the only teams that's more than is the 3 service academies, not surprisingly, but 0 interceptions. And last year they threw 117 passes, 0 interceptions. That was the second fewest pass attempts last year. So they're going on 2 full seasons without an interception, which there's your storyline for the Cure Bowl.
And it is the Cure Bowl. I should mention a PSA also. The Cure Bowl is one of the few bowls that's not on ESPN. It's on CBS Network, and it's at 2:30 p.m. Eastern on that Saturday when we have all those glorious G5 bowl games to start our bowl season. So Liberty, Georgia Southern is on CBS Network. When you're sort of flipping around going, hey, wait a second, I could have swore there was another game on here opposite the New Mexico Bowl, CBS Network. The Cherubim Boca Raton Bowl is actually a pretty interesting one. There will be no Lane Kiffin. He is gone from FAU, but Florida Atlantic is in this game against SMU, which was a revived SMU team that won 10 games, right? SMU won 10 games this year. And this is one of those situations where you look at it and go, well, wouldn't it be cool if these two teams, which both had very good years out of the G5, couldn't you find some P5 matchups for them? Maybe find a Power 5 matchup as opposed to putting them against each other. The fun thing, though, is pretty good offenses here, and that should be, I would imagine, a pretty good time in Boca Raton.
Yeah, 2 10-win teams, and SMU, obviously, pretty incredible story to get into the top 25 at some point. They're not currently there, but they're close, so they could still finish in the top 25. You never know what to expect with the teams with interim coaches, with Lane gone. I think SMU is just probably clearly they play better competition. Florida Atlantic, give them credit for the season that they had, but the American is much stronger than Conference USA. SMU with a ton of talent on that offense. The receivers they've had. So I think SMU will probably win that pretty handily, but it is FAU's home field. And they did win 10 games for a reason, so it could be a pretty fun one.
Okay, and I haven't done the research on this, but it's probably a story I'm going to have to write. This is a game where both quarterbacks are transfers. Shane Buechele on SMU is a Texas transfer. FAU's Chris Robison or Robison, I'm not sure which one it is, but he is an Oklahoma transfer. There's a whole lot of transfers over in the playoff, too, but I probably should go through the rosters at some point and see how many of these kids are transfers. So that's the bowl that's in Boca Raton, so it's essentially played in FAU Stadium, if I remember correctly.
And if we can point, since this is the AP podcast, yes, if SMU wins, there's a chance they could be finished ranked for the first time since 1984.
Excellent.
So pretty good.
Right before they went on the death penalty, and that's I would think a fairly decent chance. You get to 11 wins, it would be
they're the number one receiving votes right now, so they're right on the cusp.
Matt is a voter, and often he knows more about the poll than I do.
I did not vote for them this week, but I could have. Well, no, they're a few spots behind Oklahoma State, a few points, but pretty close.
Okay, still on that Saturday, the Camellia Bowl, which is down in Montgomery, Alabama, because every major city in Alabama has a bowl game, is Florida International, not FAU, but FIU. That's Butch Davis's school, which, didn't have a particularly good year, even though they were one of the favorites to win Conference USA. They only went 6-6, but they beat Miami.
So, yes, they did. And I thought they could win 9 or 10 before this year. Like, they were my Conference USA favorite. So you wouldn't think they'd be a disappointment in a season that they beat Miami, but it wasn't quite, I don't think, what they expected. But I will say,
and just to say, facing Arkansas State in this game.
Yes, we should expect a good game based on the history of this bowl. I mean, not that is what matters. Like, just because past games have been good doesn't mean this one will be, but listen to the scores of the past Camellia Bowls. Last year was 23-21. 2017 was 35-30. 2016, 31-28. 2015, 31-29. And 2014, 33-28. Every game has been a one-possession game, and they've all been like something like 32-28-ish. So there's a weird trend going on in the Camellia Bowl, but they have been – it might be the most obscure bowl game of them all, possibly, but – the games have been pretty good, and I think this matchup could be pretty good.
Yeah, it's so the rich history of the Camellia Bowl suggests that you should carve out some time to watch it because it should be a fun one. Okay, here's the main event of the first day, or actually the second day, right? Because the first weekend of bowl season. And that is the Las Vegas Bowl. The Las Vegas Bowl always is very early, though that's going to change. This is the old Las Vegas Bowl. Still has this year and I think next year before they change contracts. I can't remember now. It doesn't really matter. But as of right now, it's a Mountain West Pac-12 game. And this year, It is Washington against Boise State, and why that is interesting is because it is Chris Peterson's final game as coach at Washington, and as you probably all know, he used to coach at Boise State, and this will be the first meeting. No, it won't be the first meeting. Will it be the first meeting? Or have they played? No, they've played.
I believe they've played.
No, I'm sorry. Yeah, it will not be the first meeting, but it will be the last game. Yes, they have definitely played since Peterson transferred over there. Since Peterson switched jobs.
Close enough.
But Peterson against Boise State to end his Washington career.
Yeah, pretty good one. And it's an interesting test for Boise State. You know, Washington's one of the most disappointing teams in the country. 7-5, but if you look at like some of the advanced metrics, still really like Washington. Like ESPN's FPI has Washington 18th, which, you know, based on what they've accomplished this season would not be accurate. But in terms of if they're power rating them, that's kind of where Washington's viewed ahead of Boise State. So it'd be an interesting game. You know, Boise State's had a great year, 12-1. You know, certainly had a legitimate case for the Cotton Bowl. Didn't get there, but you know, pretty compelling matchup. And I think kind of a big matchup too. We talk about, you know, bowl season isn't just about NFL draft prospects, but I am curious to see Jacob Eason here, who's gotten some draft hype, but is also feel like pretty up and down as a quarterback. Still a lot to prove, and this is a difficult matchup against a really good Boise State team with some good defensive players.
I'm also interested to see if Boise. You know, Boise feels like a team that had a really great year, but still sort of pieced it together a little bit. Went through 3 different quarterbacks, spent a lot of the year looking for an ace running back. It just seemed like it was a weird year for Boise. We found them in a lot of close games against some teams, especially on the road, that you'd think, oh, man, like they were double-digit favorites, like, for example, this past weekend. Or, 2 weekends ago when they ended the regular season in sort of a death struggle with the Colorado State team that wasn't too bad. So, again, there's also the interest of motivation here. Boise was shooting for the Cotton Bowl. My guess is Boise against a Pac-12 team will be clearly motivated, and it'll be interesting to see what you get out of Washington. You're right, a team that I found to be maybe the most disappointing team in the country and maybe an extremely frustrating team because you saw the highs could be very high, but the lows were inexplicably low.
Yeah, and it felt like the Pac-12 for a while. It felt like there was going to be parity in the Pac-12 was there for the taking. And Washington's just a team that gets upset once, but then it's just never really picked itself back up. And you know, this is can they send Chris Peterson out on a high note? We'll see. I think if I had to make a pick, I might actually lean toward Washington right now, but certainly it stands out as the most compelling matchup of those first few days for sure.
Yeah, that Saturday wraps up with, and here we go towards, again, another situation where you see, boy, if only we could get that team a game against a Power 5 team. It's the New Orleans Bowl, which always has the Sun Belt champion, or just about always has the Sun Belt champion against a Conference USA team in this case. It's App State at 12-1, back-to-back Sun Belt titles, ranked in every poll at the end of the season, facing a UAB team, which, listen, Bill Clark did a great job of making UAB really good this year, very relevant. This was a team that had a massive roster turnover after they relied on a lot of upperclassmen and grad transfers and junior college transfers to get the program back on its feet. But they got blown out by FAU, so I think that sort of gives you an idea of what the talent level is there. And now they're going to face an App State team that, you know, has beaten 2 Power 5 teams.
Yeah, UAB, you know, credit for what they've done. Again, it's just been remarkable what they've done since the program came back under Bill Clark. But, you know, their resume was very thin for much of this year. When you look at their wins, they beat Alabama State, Akron, South Alabama, Rice, UTSA, Old Dominion, UTEP. They had a good win against Louisiana Tech, but Louisiana Tech's quarterback missed the game. So, you know, they did beat North Texas on the road to end the regular season, but kind of a thin resume. So, you know, App State, I think, is just a clearly superior team, just dealing with another wild card. App State with, you know, Eli Drinkwitz heading to Missouri, another second straight year with a coaching search for App State. So that's the one wild card. But, you know, you think App State is just a clearly superior team here.
Can we stick on this for just a second here? I don't want to get off in too many tangents, but Drinkwitz did a tremendous job because it's not necessarily an easy thing to step into a team that is ready-made to win, because sometimes those kids will look at you and say, what do you know? Like, we're already good. we don't necessarily need you to make us good. Josh Heupel did a nice job of that last season when he took over at UCF, and Drinkwitz did a very nice job. He's a guy with Boise State in his past, but with lineage back to Arkansas and Gus Malzahn, I believe. He moved from North Carolina State to App State, got the head job there, and walked into a great situation and won the Sun Belt and has had a terrific year. He just got $4 million a year, or I don't know if it's been made official yet, but it sounds like he's going to get $4 million a year to coach Missouri. I feel bad knocking him, and good for him. Great for Eli, and great for his family.
Crazy rapid rise.
That just seems like a little crazy to give him that much money after he had one season as a head coach with a ready-made team.
And Bill Clark, I don't know how much interest has been in him, but it does feel like he's a guy who would get hired by somebody for what he's done at UAB, but still at UAB here.
Yeah, it's weird. I tweeted this out the other day, and some people sort of were like, well, that doesn't make sense. But I talked to a lot of people who do these searches, be it on the AD side and the agent side, on the search firm side. And for some reason, there is this feeling that if you have no Power 5 experience, not necessarily as a head coach, but just somewhere in your background, I think there becomes like some worry that you won't be able to handle all that comes with a Power 5 program, that the Power 5 programs have become so big. They're such massive machines that a guy like Bill Clark, who you would think like has done a great job with so little, but
right.
They worry that that won't translate when you have so much. And Clark's background, for people who don't know, is like high school. I mean, he's never been above sort of this level of coaching.
Well, I can see that philosophy. I can see why that would be a reason. Though I think what he's done at UAB is still hard to deny. And for some of these schools that, I don't know. I feel like it's worth a shot for somebody.
Yeah, and it probably should be at this point, but it certainly looks like this cycle might end, though you never know what might pop up on a slightly higher G5 level for a guy like Bill Clark. We might pick it up just a little bit. Bad Boy Mowers Gasparilla Bowl is on December 23rd. UCF against Marshall. Marshall has gotten rolled by most good teams it has faced. UCF has actually been pretty good. I know they had a bad loss at Tulsa.
Tulsa was going to beat somebody at some point. Like they had all these close games against pretty good teams, so it's a bad loss, but UCF still had a good season. It's just not up to the standards that they've obviously set that were impossible to keep matching.
Yeah, they're basically a good example of, sometimes the ball doesn't bounce your way, and you have like a bad game or an off game, and that's how you go 9-3 as opposed to 11-1. And that was sort of UCF this year, but this should be a game in Tampa, so not too far from UCF's campus at Raymond James Stadium. This should be a game, display Dylan Gabriel, the quarterback, and sort of get sort of launching next season. But UCF was still a very, very good team, probably a team that could be borderline in the rankings. In fact, I just as a poll voter, I'm wondering, how close were you to ranking them at certain points of the year? Like, because obviously they dropped out of the rankings a while ago, but they were still sort of on the fringes with some folks.
Yeah, they were very close until the Tulsa loss. I mean, they lost to Pitt by 1. They lost to Cincinnati by 3. Neither of those is like a bad loss. And then, so they were sitting at 7-2, and they were very close. But then they lose to Tulsa again. That was only by 3 points. So all 3 games were really, really tight losses. I think they only had one close win, which was 34-31 at a solid Tulane team. So this is still potentially a top 25 type team, even if their record doesn't say it. So you'd expect them to handle Marshall, but it is kind of a step down going to the Gasparilla Bowl after a couple of years in the New Year's Six.
Okay, now another New Year's Eve tradition, if you're a person who likes to – see, here's the thing. If you're not a parent yet, Matt, so the Hawaii Bowl is great because when you have younger kids, you sort of get them either off to bed or they're doing things that distract them maybe, and while you're, in my case, me, putting together a dollhouse, right? And you're putting together the dollhouse in a room while watching the Hawaii Bowl or putting together a bike or something like that. So that's the Hawaii Bowl I always correlate with or relate to doing something to prepare for Christmas the next day. December 24th, the Hawaii Bowl is Hawaii and BYU.
And I must say, last year ruined the tradition. Last year it was on December 22nd.
It was awful.
So
yes.
I must say, welcome back to our greatest Christmas Eve tradition, an 8 o'clock game in Hawaii. I love it every year. And, this is a pretty good matchup. Hawaii was a team that, before the year, like their Vegas win total was like 5 or 5.5, and I just thought that was crazy. I know they haven't had, a long track record of success, and they can be up and down, but I thought they had a chance to win the Mountain West, and they ended up doing it. So I was wrong about plenty before the season, but I think I was right about Hawaii. And good to see them have another nice year. It should be a pretty good game, though. BYU is kind of an unpredictable team, but I think probably the better team. But you never know going to Honolulu. I think this should be a pretty fun one.
And Zach Wilson, quarterback for BYU, I believe should be back and healthy for that. I believe he was back at the end of the year. So if you have Zach Wilson on one side and Cole McDonald on the other, could be some fireworks there. December 26th, and oh boy, Miami.
Yeah.
So the Independence Bowl, God love Shreveport. I've spent some quality time in Shreveport covering the Independence Bowl, so I like the bowl. But Louisiana Tech, another very solid year under Skip Holtz, though they sort of petered out at the finish with some suspensions and injuries. And this is where Miami lands in its first season under Manny Diaz in Shreveport, 6-6, facing Louisiana Tech.
Well, not where I thought. I thought Miami had a decent chance to, to be an ACC coastal contender. I mean, the division was wide open. Miami's schedule looked favorable, and then they go out and do things like lose to FIU. So, how up for this game will they be? Louisiana Tech, they lost to Texas earlier, then they beat a bunch of bad teams, had a really good record. We're kind of on the cusp of the top 25 as well. Had some suspensions. So Miami should win this game easily, but we said that about the FIU game as well. So this is one of those ones where you tune in and Miami could win by 40, or they could come in and just, kind of look bad and go through the motions, and maybe Louisiana Tech has a chance. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like the Independence Bowl has now become like the penalty box for ACC teams, right?
Yes.
Like we sent Florida State there a couple of years ago when they barely cobbled together 6-6, and they ended up winning. I think they ended up beating Southern Miss like pretty badly. So now we're sending Miami there after its terrible year, and we'll see what happens with Louisiana Tech. So again, like I said, if Miami is not prepared for this game, I'm telling you, Louisiana Tech will beat them.
They have some good players, but Amik Robinson, their star cornerback, there's been some chatter about whether or not he'll play in the bowl game. He's going to be an NFL draft pick, so there is that to watch really for both teams because Miami still has some talent as well that will be going to the draft. So I don't know. I'm more fascinated in this game than I should be, I think.
Yeah, that's a good point. We haven't even got into that too much, and we'll save a lot of that discussion for a particularly interesting game, and that is, who's playing in some of these games. I mean, that's why I'm almost apprehensive to make picks, because at a certain point,
right,
we're going to figure out like 3 or 4 key guys aren't going to be playing. The Quick Lane Bowl has another game with a little bit of a veil of sadness around
December 26th is what a day of bowl games that is, those two.
So the Quick Lane Bowl is in Detroit at Ford Field. Eastern Michigan is going to be pumped to be there because they're a MAC team with 6 wins, and they're going to be pumped to be there. Actually, they may even have 7 wins. But Pitt, I can imagine, probably had bigger plans in mind than Eastern Michigan. Pitt's like Pitt as usually, because this is in Pitt's DNA. They can be very good at times. They have the capability of being a team that is like a good team and can compete against some good teams. So Pitt could conceivably just tear apart Eastern Michigan. But who knows what you're going to get, right?
Yeah, they're basically playing a road. What ACC team has to play like a road game against a MAC team in a bowl game? Because that's effectively what this is. And you look at Pitt's decade. They started this decade, 2010, by playing in Birmingham. Then they went back to Birmingham, and then they went back to Birmingham again, and then they went to Detroit. Now there's been a nice break, but this is their 5th time in either Detroit or Birmingham for the bowl season. Wow. And no offense to either of those places, but they're not the most, not the most appealing bowl destinations necessarily. And Pitt has spent a lot of time in them. They did go to New York the one year. They've been in El Paso. They've been in Annapolis. They've been in Fort Worth. It's been an interesting decade of bowl trips for Pitt, to say the least.
I mean, quite frankly, like El Paso, that's the score, right? That's the that's the big trip if you're Pitt over the last 10 years in the ACC.
Congrats to Eastern Michigan, 3 bowls in 4 years. They were 6-6 this year. They were one of the teams that, there was one bowl team left. One team left out of the bowls. It was Toledo. Mm-hmm. Eastern Michigan was looked at as maybe that's going to be the team, and they ended up going 3rd in 4 years for Chris Creighton, who it's a tough job. He's done a remarkable job. They hadn't been to a bowl game since 1987, and they have a reputation for playing just a ridiculous number of close games the past few years, and it kind of got broken a little bit toward the end of this year, but they played a ton of them. So I don't know. Pitt should steamroll them, but for all I know, it's probably going to be a 2-point game in overtime because that's what Eastern Michigan does.
All right. The next day is always the December 27th has now become a day where it's just, the Power 5 teams start cranking up, maybe not the best ones, but the Power 5 teams start cranking up, and that becomes sort of an interesting day of bowls. There's a whole mess of them. We'll talk about these, then we'll take a little break, and then we'll come back and get into some of the bigger games. But, there's some interesting stuff going on December 27th, starting with the Military Bowl, which is North Carolina and Temple. I know this is not true, but it feels like Temple plays in the Military Bowl every year. At least this year they're playing with the coach who started the year, so that's a plus for Temple. But, hey, Mac Brown's back in the bowl game.
Yeah, I mentioned close games for Eastern Michigan. Nobody has been in more close games, I feel like, than North Carolina this year. It's not true their last 2. They blew out Mercer, they blew out NC State, but in their first 10 games, 9 of them were decided by 1 possession. So a lot of games that could have gone either way. They end up kind of split the difference, going 6-6, better than last year, of course. So pretty solid debut for Mac Brown. Temple maybe a little bit underrated. They did beat Memphis, who's in the Cotton Bowl, but so that actually could be a pretty good game. I would expect North Carolina to win, but pretty solid, I think, underrated matchup there.
A good stat, and I'll credit Adam Rittenberg because I'm sort of following along with some of his column here. Rod Carey, Temple coach, 0-6 in bowl games at Northern Illinois. And did a nice job at Northern Illinois. Got them 2 bowl games every year and were consistently a contender in the MAC. Did an okay job, I thought, considering a Temple this year, getting them back to a bowl game. But 0-6 in bowl games with NIU, and we'll see what happens here in his first bowl game at Temple. The Pinstripe Bowl at Yankee Stadium, which I used to get a chance to cover, but then the playoff has made it impossible because I'm almost never in New York on the day of the Pinstripe Bowl, is Michigan State, which could not have had really a much worse year and still made a bowl game, against Wake Forest, which was having a brilliant year until a bunch of guys got hurt down the stretch and ended up, sort of stumbling into the Pinstripe Bowl. Wake Forest, it was only maybe a month ago we were thinking this could be an Orange Bowl team, right, if the way things are set up in the ACC. Michigan State hasn't had much offense all year. What do you think about this game?
Yeah, if this was the Wake Forest of like a few years ago, the over-under in this game would be like 12. But Wake Forest has been a little bit better on offense. Unfortunately, injuries have taken a toll on the Demon Deacons. But it's tough to get a read on them. They had the Orange Bowl buzz, but we knew they weren't like a legit Orange Bowl team, just like Virginia. We know the ACC is down, to say the least. But Wake Forest was 7-1, and they've lost 3 of their last 4. And, okay, they lost to Virginia Tech. Okay, they got blown out by Clemson. And then they end the year by losing at Syracuse, which is a pretty disappointing way to end what's been a good year for Wake Forest. So tough to – what are these teams coming into the bowl game with? I don't know. It's disappointing end of the year for Wake Forest, disappointing just season as a whole for Michigan State. The offense has just been a mess. The changes they made to the coaching staff, which was just reshuffling titles, did not work after last year. I think some of us thought maybe this could be Mark D'Antonio's last game, but there's been no indication that will be the case. So I don't know. I maybe I give Michigan State's defense the edge, and especially if you get some cold, snowy weather, which is always possible in the Pinstripe Bowl on December 27th. But not really where either team hoped their season would end up, even though Wake Forest, no bowl game should ever be taken lightly for Wake Forest, and it is New York. But things kind of did turn south for both of them by the end of the year.
Yeah, I could see Dave Clawson convincing his guys that this is a big deal. Let's go out and beat a Big Ten team. I have a hard time figuring out a way where any of those Spartans are thrilled to be at this game.
Michigan State has beaten 2 teams since September, and you can probably guess who they are.
They are
Rutgers and Maryland.
Rutgers and Maryland, and they had a death struggle with Maryland.
That's correct. So I don't know. Maybe I like Wake Forest in this game.
Okay, so the Academy Sports Outdoors Texas Bowl is Oklahoma State and Texas A&M. The thing I'm noticing about Oklahoma State, now clearly if you're a Big 12 team, you will see, there's a possibility you will see a bunch of former Big 12 teams in bowl games. But it seems like this happens with Oklahoma State a lot. So I checked it out. This is the 5th time since the Big 12 sort of splintered off and Missouri and Texas A&M and Colorado and Nebraska sort of went on their way. This is the 5th time that Oklahoma State has played another former Big 12 team. Now, I haven't compared the rest of them, but it just seems like every year Oklahoma State is playing a bowl game which just looks like a mid-October Big 12 game. So Oklahoma State is facing Texas A&M in the Texas Bowl. What you think?
I wish it was Texas versus Texas A&M. I'm sorry. I just wish it could happen. Sometime force those two to play in some random bowl game on a Friday. And I wish that could happen. But this could still be an interesting game. And, Texas A&M has just had the weird year where they played 3 number 1 teams in the AP poll, the first team to ever do that. And that makes them also the first team to ever lose to 3 number 1 teams. They played a really tough schedule, basically lost to all the good teams on their schedule. Oklahoma State's dealt with injuries. Spencer Sanders has been banged up, the quarterback. They do have Chuba Hubbard. If he plays in this game, he's the best player in the game and has had a phenomenal season that's gone, I don't want to say under the radar, but in some respect it has, just because Oklahoma State has been an unpredictable team that the past few years they tend to win games they shouldn't and lose games they shouldn't. Mm-hmm. Or win games. So I don't know. I think Texas A&M is a very good team that sometimes in the rankings got the benefit of the doubt just because they kept losing to good teams, but you feel like they are good enough to get a win over a quality opponent. So I probably lean to the Aggies in this one, but it should be a pretty good game.
Yeah, Chuba Hubbard, if he does play, and there's a possibility, he's certainly one of those guys we look at and think, well, will he play? Is, I believe, 74, can I do the math here? 64 yards away from a 2,000-yard season, which is pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. And, a place coming into the year, we would think about Tylan Wallace at wide receiver, and he got hurt. And they really had a pretty dynamic trio of players on offense, and injuries have taken their toll. But Hubbard, 6.3 yards per carry, 21 touchdowns, 1,900 yards. Really, really, really impressive. So, this a good matchup here, I feel like, in the Texas Bowl that I'm pretty interested to watch.
The Holiday Bowl, San Diego County Credit Union Holiday Bowl, as it were, matches a team that we thought might be playing without its coach. But Clay Helton is there. Clay Helton's going to be in San Diego. He is still the USC coach. So that was big news out of off the coaching carousel, that USC was not going to be in the market for a head coach. And the Trojans, who had a pretty good year, if you consider injuries and things like that, you can sort of make a case for them having had a pretty good year. Pretty good is not really good enough at USC. Face an Iowa team that is quintessential Iowa. They have played very good defense. They have played very good defense this year. They have an excellent kicker, and their offense often cannot get out of its own way.
This feels like a game where, even though there's still kind of a lot of negativity, at least from USC fans, about keeping Clay Helton, it does, like, you can just feel it that this team does have talent. They found a young quarterback in Keaton Slovis, and if they win this game, they're probably going to have some momentum. It's going to be one of those teams that gets some momentum going into the offseason, despite the recruiting problems, despite the negativity about the coach. You look at it, it's like you could very easily see USC turning around and winning the Pac-12 next year. And after keeping Helton, because they have that talent, and the Pac-12 will probably be open enough to have that chance. So given just the intense spotlight on Helton, this is a game, every game is one that just feels like he has to win, but it's going to be a long offseason if they lose this game.
Yeah, it could definitely behoove Clay to go into the offseason with a victory, because as it is, the fan base is sort of kicking rocks here and a little down. As for Iowa, again, they beat Minnesota. They've been really competitive against all the good teams because that defense is so good. And for those of you who don't follow Iowa that closely, A.J. Epineza defensive end is probably the best defensive end in the country, not named Chase Young. There are some others to be argued out there, but I would argue that he is in the non-Chase Young category. He is about the best defensive end you're going to find in the nation.
And Tristan Wirfs is one of the best offensive linemen, too, at tackle. So Iowa has, not shockingly, Iowa has some good linemen on both sides of the ball.
A little later on in that day, the late kickoff actually is the Cheez-Its Bowl. Let's stop for the Cheez-Its Bowl for just a second. It's at Chase Field at the baseball stadium in Phoenix. Last year it was the site of, was it
the greatest bowl game of all time?
Was it 10-3? We'll have to look at the score here. Phil.
10-7.
10-7 in overtime. 10-7 in overtime, if I remember correctly.
That's correct. Won by a field goal in overtime, and the teams threw a combined 9 interceptions.
Right. Cal and TCU.
It was wonderful.
Right. And we all loved it, and it became the breakout bowl on Twitter. So last year, 10-7 in overtime. This year, it probably won't be 10-7. The Cheez-Its Bowl is, but again, very entertaining. Air Force and its triple option against Washington State and its air raid.
This is exactly what you would expect it to be. Air Force averages 57 rushes per game, which is the third most in the country behind Navy and Army. Washington State averages the fewest rushes in the country at 16.8. And you flip that around, Washington State averages 55 passes per game. Air Force averages 9.5. And Washington State, he hasn't gotten the attention of Gardner Minshew because Washington State has not been as good this year, but Anthony Gordon, 5,200 yards, 72% completion rate, 45 touchdowns, and he has thrown 16 interceptions, but averaging 435 passing yards per game. So this is, needless to say, contrasting styles, and my hope for this game is that Air Force throws 0 passes and Washington State has 0 runs.
Definitely a possibility. Okay, so we're running a little long, but I want to take a quick break. We're going to hit the meaty bowls toward the post-Christmas bowls right after this with Matt Brown from The Athletic. We are doing the bowl preview here on the AP Top 25 College Football Podcast, and we'll be back right after this.
This podcast is presented by Regions Bank. You're chasing your goals, and it's up to you how you want to get there. Let Regions Bank coach you with financial tips that fit your everyday grind. Visit regions.com/next-step to learn more. Regions, member FDIC.
And we're back on the AP Top 25 College Football Podcast. Talking with Matt Brown. It almost sounds like Matt Brown. Talking with Matt Brown from The Athletic. He's an editor. He's also a college football poll voter for the AP, and he knows college football as deep and wide, as far and wide and as deep as anybody in the country. So that's why I bring him on to preview the bowls. December 28th is the Camping World Bowl, which is in Orlando, and Notre Dame, Iowa State. That's a pretty good game.
Yeah, this is a good game. I'm disappointed that it's on at the same time as the Cotton Bowl. You have 2 games here, both at noon Eastern that day, leading into the semifinals. But Notre Dame, Iowa State, it's kind of odd. Notre Dame, it's a 2-loss team, but stuck in, not getting a New Year's Six game. People usually expect Notre Dame to get the benefit of the doubt. That did not happen this year. They do have, I think, a little bit better of a resume than people give them credit for, but they did get blown out by Michigan, which kind of ruined everything.
Yeah. Weird year for an overlooked Notre Dame team. They got blown up by Michigan. They landed in the middle of the rankings, and they just got forgotten about.
They beat a bunch of fringe top 25 teams. They beat Virginia, USC, Virginia Tech, and Navy. So, some decent wins, but not, that season-changing wins since they lost to Georgia and got blown off the field by Michigan. But good matchup here. Iowa State isn't one that could have easily they were a trendy team before the year. They're trying to finish in the top 25 for the first time since 2000, but has not happened. They're 7-5. They lost tough, close games. They lost by 1 to Oklahoma, 7 to Oklahoma State, 2 to Baylor, 1 to Iowa. They, of course, also beat Northern Iowa by 3, so they're another team that has been in a ton of close games. And I would probably expect that again here. I think this is a really, really solid matchup. Iowa State, they do some fun things defensively. They've been one of the better defenses in the Big 12. So I do like this matchup a lot, and give Iowa State a decent chance to win the game, even though the record's 7-5. I think they could match up pretty well and could win a close game.
Yeah, we talked about Washington as a team that probably is a little better than its 7-5 record, but was frustrating in that it had some very strange highs and lows. Iowa State performed almost at the same level every week, and it was just a matter of, well, are the bounces going to go their way this week, or are a couple of plays going to go their way? Are they going to make a play this week to swing the game? Or is their opponent going to make a play to swing the game? Because they play pretty steadily at the same level almost every week, and they play super hard, and I am interested to see how this one rolls. It's odd to have a Notre Dame team that sort of flies under the radar, but you could make a case that Notre Dame's resume and how they look doesn't look all that much different from some teams in the New Year's Six games. You see teams like Penn State and Florida, and you think Notre Dame could probably hang with those teams, but Notre Dame just sort of got forgotten about after the Michigan loss. The rest of December 28th is playoffs. Oh, excuse me. No, they're not. There's the Cotton Bowl, and later is the playoffs. So we're going to hold off on the playoff, but we will hit on the Cotton Bowl. Speaking of the New Year's Six and Penn State faces Memphis in the Cotton Bowl. Memphis may or may not be with Mike Norvell. He's the new Florida State coach. He would like to coach the Cotton Bowl and do the two-job thing that some other guys have done. Maybe. We'll see what happens there. Memphis has got a ton of playmakers. Penn State strikes me as one of those teams that, if it wins its bowl game, is probably going to be a sort of a trendy pick next year anyway, yes. But especially if it wins its bowl game in those way too early top 25s, you'll see Penn State fringe top 5.
Yeah, I think so too. And some Penn State fans are disappointed that they didn't get the Rose Bowl. I understand that. And, but this is a good matchup, and the group of 5 teams have fared very well in the New Year's Six games over the past few years. So this is a good matchup against a Memphis team that is explosive on offense, has good skill players. Brady White's had a nice year at quarterback. So it's an interesting test for Penn State. And Penn State's third New Year's Six Bowl in 4 years, which is pretty remarkable given what people thought the program would be this decade after the sanctions. So chance for another top 10 season. And I think the one big decision for Penn State is waiting to see if KJ Hamler decides to come back for his redshirt junior year. Pat Freiermuth, the tight end, is coming back, because that Penn State offense could have 10 starters returning next year.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about Hamler.
9 or 10 Justin Shorter transferring, but borderline 9 or 10. A ton of talent coming back, and also probably the best player in the team, Micah Parsons at linebacker, will be back next year as a junior. So I agree with you. This is one of those games where, it's against a group of 5 team, but if Penn State does what it thinks it should and wins this game, it's absolutely a trendy team. It's probably not going to be surpassing Ohio State in Big Ten hype next year, but kind of the next biggest thing in the Big Ten at least next year.
And Matt lives in State College, so he gets a whole lot of Penn State in his face. So the thing I found with Penn State this year is I found it to be a team that, especially on the offensive side, seemed to be a team with a lot of talented players that was just still trying to figure out what they were, what a real identity was. They could make a lot of big plays, but what were they hanging their hat on? Which is not necessarily the bad way to be. You want a lot of talented players. If you have a lot of talented players and you can build on that, that's a good way to start.
Well, and another interesting storyline here is my colleague Bruce Feldman reporting that Penn State offensive coordinator Ricky Ronnie is expected to get the Old Dominion head coaching job. So Penn State could have a new offensive coordinator potentially.
Yeah, that's interesting because I had heard that Ronnie was going to be in the mix down there as well. Shane Beamer was the other name. I think a lot of people, when that job first opened up, people thought Shane Beamer, son of Frank Beamer, the retired Hall of Fame Virginia Tech coach, would just sort of slide into there. He's been the special teams coordinator at Oklahoma. It seemed like, of course, Shane Beamer will return to Virginia and grab that job. Ricky Ronnie is an interesting fit there, and you're right. Do they have someone that you think on the staff that they would promote? Nothing comes to mind, but again, you're there.
Running backs coach Jaywan Sider is very, very valuable, and he's a guy that other teams are presumably going to come after because of how good of a recruiter he is, and he's gotten Penn State into Florida in terms of recruiting, so he is very valuable. Whether or not he's a guy who's going to be the next play caller, I don't know, but if somebody was internal, you'd think it would be a guy that is probably going to get a promotion somewhere. So I don't know where Penn State will look, but that if anybody on the staff, that's the one interesting name there, because he is one of the better recruiters in the country, really, and is very valuable in the staff as they try to recruit more nationally.
Okay, so the next, again, we will put the playoff to the side because we will get into that later and spend lots of time on it. So we will pick up with December 30th. Also, PSA, the playoff games are on December 28th. The national championship game is on January 13th. If you're thinking, that seems like a long time.
Yeah, we have a lot of bowls to get through here still.
That is a really long time. So, yeah, we still have a lot of bowls to get to, and we'll try to pick up the pace a little bit. But there's a long time between the semifinals and the championship game this year. On December 30th, it's the First Responders Bowl in Dallas. It was the game that got basically canceled last year. They played about a quarter between Boston College and Boise State. A terrible storm came in. I can vouch for that storm because I was in Dallas at the time, because that's where a playoff game was last year, and it looked like Armageddon was coming through Dallas. So I'm not trying to make light of it. It was a little bit of a scary storm, and it got the game canceled after about a quarter. This year, it's Western Kentucky against Western Michigan. Who will be the greatest Western?
Well, number one, I hope the game is just played. First of all, that'll be a success if it is. Number two, I think this actually is a decent game here. Western Kentucky exceeded expectations. Nice job under Tyson Helton this year. So I might lean toward WKU, but I think it's actually a pretty close matchup. Both of these conferences kind of had a lot of parity. Western Michigan, I thought, was my favorite coming into the year in the MAC. They didn't quite get it done, but I just hope they play the game.
Yeah, and at least one member of the Helton family had a really good year this year as far as coaching is concerned, because Tyson Helton, Clay's brother, I believe, not cousin, brother, had a great year at Western Kentucky. I mean, really did a fine job of taking over a program that that was really starting to crumble and got them back into Conference USA contention. The next up would be the Franklin Mortgage Music City Bowl, Mississippi State at Louisville. They just played this game a couple of years ago, didn't they? Didn't they just play Mississippi? Am I crazy? Didn't Mississippi State and Louisville just play a bowl game within the last 2 or 3
Lamar
years?
Jackson?
I thought it was. Wasn't Lamar's last game? I thought was. Let's let the Google ask.
Yeah, who can look it up first? Is that where the game
yes,
yeah,
exactly.
That was in Jacksonville.
But it was those two teams. It was just in a different site.
Yes.
Okay.
2017. So 2 years later, and this is after all of this massive SEC bowl confusion, where it looked like Tennessee was going to go to the Music City Bowl.
Yeah, give us a little bit on that. Yeah.
Tennessee had like preference in this. There's a group, they call them like the group of 6 SEC bowl games, and they're all kind of on an even plane. And, the conference dictates the matchups, but depending on record and head-to-head, some teams get preference. Tennessee, had preference on where it could go, and initially it sounded like it wanted to go play in-state in the Music City Bowl. And then, at the last minute, it decides, no, let's go to Jacksonville and play in the Gator Bowl against Indiana. So there's a whole bunch of confusing shuffling, and it ends with Mississippi State and Louisville again, except this time in the Music City Bowl. Mississippi State here, of course, because of the strange events of the Egg Bowl that got it eligible, and Louisville with a really nice first season under Scott Satterfield. Louisville's season it went the other way in its rivalry game, did not play well against Kentucky, but still a nice job there. And Joe Moorhead got some pressure off of him by winning the Egg Bowl, but it would certainly help to go out this season with a bowl win after a season that was fairly disappointing for the Bulldogs.
Yeah, strange year for Louisville. Great year, seriously, for Louisville, despite the fact that it ended a little rough with getting punked by your rival Kentucky. But it just sort of also speaks to the idea that, listen, it's kind of amazing that Satterfield was able to piece that thing together there. They didn't have a ton of depth and talent and size, but he was able to use a lot of young players, do some things on offensively that were creative to give them a little bit of advantage. But ultimately, they weren't really ready to compete, but they overachieved in a lot of different ways and just to get themselves into a bowl game. The Red Box Bowl is played out in Santa Clara, California, and that was another one last year that really hit some high notes. That was, I believe, 7-6.
Yes.
That was Oregon.
Yes, it was.
That was Oregon and Michigan State. So now Michigan State obviously ended up having a heck of a year. Or excuse me, Oregon ended up going on to a heck of a year. So it propelled Oregon, apparently, the Redbox Bowl last year to bigger and better
scoreless
things.
At halftime, and Oregon scored a touchdown in the fourth quarter to win.
So we might not get that much more than that this year.
I don't think we will.
Because California does what Cal does, which is generally like play pretty good defense with Evan Weaver, the linebacker, leading the way against an Illinois team that can't really throw it much, but has managed to piece together a pretty good running game. What do you think? I mean, great job by Lovey just getting this team bowl eligible. Hey, this team beat Wisconsin, for God's sakes. The team that's in the Rose Bowl lost to Illinois. So Illinois-Cal in the Redbox Bowl.
So my question is, what exactly was Illinois thinking when they played that way against Northwestern to end the season? Northwestern,
right, and just completely face planted against Northwestern. Completely face planted against
Illinois
Northwestern.
won 4 in a row, starting with the Wisconsin game to get bowl eligible. They beat Wisconsin. They won at Purdue. They won at Michigan State, and then they lose to Iowa and lose 29-10 to just an absolute dreadful Northwestern offense. So I don't know what the deal there was. Cal's offense has been pretty mediocre most of the year at best. This just makes me think of Illinois has not been to many bowl games recently. This is their second, I believe, since 2011. And the last time they were in the heart of Dallas Bowl in 2014. The time before that was 2011, which was the year that Ron Zook started 6-0 and then lost 6 in a row and got fired. And they ended up in the Fight Hunger Bowl, which is the forerunner to the Redbox Bowl.
Oh, that's right.
Illinois
that's right.
Back in the Bay Area, where it has been before. It won that Fight Hunger Bowl against UCLA. But I guess Illinois is a little hard to predict this year, but after what happened in the last game, I probably lean toward Cal winning this one, but it very well could be like 7-6 again.
Yeah, Illinois has got a really good linebacker too in Dele Harding, who is one of the better linebackers in the Big Ten. So
Cal has Evan Weaver, who might be the best linebacker in the country.
Yeah, Evan Weaver, Dele Harding,
second best, maybe.
So stack up pretty well as far as if you like linebacker play. So let me just get this straight. So since they went to the Rose Bowl and played USC, has Illinois' bowl games been like the 2 in the Bay Area and that game against Louisiana Tech where they gave up about 15 sacks? Has that been their bowl history?
Correct, and one more they played in the 2010 Texas Bowl. So they've been to the Bay Area twice, and they've been to the state of Texas twice. In 2010, they beat Baylor 38-14 in the Texas Bowl to finish 7-6. But yes, not a particularly colorful bowl history for Illinois since that Rose Bowl.
Mm-hmm. And news just in from Utah, Morgan Scaley just got a little contract extension, it looks like, for the defensive coordinator at Utah. Got a contract extended. He's a guy whose name has come up for not just other DC jobs, but also for possible head coaching jobs. Anyway, just going to throw that in there since it literally popped into my inbox as I was watching. The Capital One Orange Bowl, well, it's the Orange Bowl, and that's great because the Orange Bowl is always kind of a cool game and has great halftime show. But Florida and Virginia, listen, Virginia's had a nice year, and Virginia Virginia, no matter what happens, no matter how bad it got against Clemson, no matter what happens in the Orange Bowl, Virginia accomplished what it set out to do this year. It won its division in the ACC, and it beat Virginia Tech. This season, without question, is a success for Virginia. Now it has to play Florida, which is probably might be a little more than it can handle.
Yeah, I was looking back and like, okay, how many times has Florida played in the Orange Bowl? And they have like a strange run of opponents in the Orange Bowl in terms of like who you would expect to be playing in Orange Bowls. And they're playing Virginia this year. Their last time in the Orange Bowl, they played Maryland in that one big season Maryland had. Before that, they played Syracuse. I know Syracuse was good in the 90s, but it's still like Syracuse, Maryland, Virginia. That is quite a run of opponents in a major bowl game. But Florida, second straight year, they are in a New Year's Six game. Just Dan Mullen's done a fantastic job there. You know, Kyle Trask comes in, hadn't started a game since his freshman year of high school, and leads the comeback against Kentucky after Felipe Franks got hurt. And then Florida goes on to a really nice year. They beat Auburn, a win that certainly looked better than after Auburn beat Alabama. I think that's kind of what pushed Florida ahead of Penn State and into the Orange Bowl. So really nice year and good defense, good receiving core. Yeah, you would expect Florida is just the as much as I love Bryce Perkins, the Virginia quarterback, Florida is just clearly the more complete team, more talented team. So you would expect Florida to take care of business here.
On December 31st, the bowl is the Belk Bowl, which is no longer going to be the Belk Bowl anymore. And the Belk Bowl has made a name for itself for having a snarky Twitter account. It's a department store, mostly in the Southeast, sponsoring a bowl in Charlotte with a snarky Twitter persona. The Belk Bowl is another piece of the mid-level SEC teams having a pissing match about which bowl they will go to. Saving you all the backstory there, Kentucky ended up in the Belk Bowl facing Virginia Tech.
And one interesting matchup here. I mean, it's the last game for Bud Foster as Virginia Tech's defensive coordinator. And he has an interesting job here because Kentucky's offense is extremely one-dimensional and yet effective. Lynn Bowden, the wide receiver who still leads the team in receiving, has been playing quarterback now for most of the year, has 151 carries for 1,235 yards and 11 touchdowns. He just absolutely trounced Louisville, 284 yards and 4 touchdowns on the ground for a wide receiver playing quarterback in a 45-13 win against Louisville. So I'm very fascinated to see that matchup.
Yeah, Bowden is a guy who I hope ends up on many All-America teams. Like,
yes,
the AP,
perfect all-purpose pick.
Yeah, the AP's got an all-purpose player. He absolutely fits that, and it's just he has been one of the fun, more interesting players of the season. I know the folks who now they're at the Banner Society, but used to be SB Nation, Spencer Hall and that crew have talked about the People's Heisman winner, and that Lynn Bowden is that kind of guy. Right?
Yes, absolutely.
If you're a college football fan who's just a little deep in the weeds, not necessarily like way deep in the weeds, but just a little deep in the weeds, and you know more than just the top 5 or 6 teams, Lynn Bowden has been on your radar. And the idea that they simply turned their offense over to a wide receiver and had him just run the ball because he's the best player on the team, so they'll just have him run the ball has been really fascinating and really interesting to see and good for Kentucky. And now I'm sorry, I don't remember if you missed it, if you even mentioned it, Bud Foster's last game as defensive coordinator for Virginia Tech will be figuring out a way to stop Lynn Bowden.
Yep. So pretty good. I like that matchup a lot.
Florida State is back in a bowl game, managed to get the 6-6, and they are getting shipped out to the Sun Bowl, which is the other place where we send ACC teams who have been bad. And I don't mean
Detroit too, McLean Bowl too. We got a lot of that.
Right. There's a few places where the ACC ships off its naughty children. Facing Arizona State out of the Pac-12, Herm Edwards pieced together a pretty good year, had a huge upset. I would still contend that Herm Edwards' Arizona State doesn't look that much different from Todd Graham's Arizona State. It has been more interesting in a sense because it's just Herm gives it a different flavor. I don't know if the results have been much different, but Florida State's going to get at least the bowl practices, which I'm sure will help Mike Norvell, even though Mike Norvell won't be coaching this game.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing as you about Arizona State. It's like the bar was set so low from Herm Edwards just because of the bizarre circumstances of the hire. And that it's like, oh, he's doing such a better job than Todd Graham is seems like a talking point sometimes. It's like, well, he has a couple of nice wins, but that's not really true. They won 7 games 2 years in a row. They've been solid but not spectacular. Todd Graham did have 2 10-win seasons not long ago. But the one thing, they are better defensively than they had been under Todd Graham, where they had some really, gave up a ton of big plays. They've been pretty good defensively. I don't know what version of Florida State is going to show up in this game. We know Florida State has some talent, but I think I lean toward Herm Edwards getting the team motivated and maybe Arizona State coming out with a solid win in El Paso.
Yeah, the most interesting difference between Arizona State now and then is that Graham was a defensive coordinator but loved to play fast, and so it was a high-risk offense, high-risk defense, and it was always felt like they were sort of flying by the seat of their pants, and you could have these massive disasters at any moment, whereas everything with the current Arizona State under Herm Edwards seems to be very controlled and methodical. So they have become a very different team as far as the way they get to those 7 wins tends to look very different, even though the results ultimately are not that different. The AutoZone Liberty Bowl, and here's a situation where one of the good group of 5 teams got a little bit of a bump up, right? There was a spot open that landed Navy against Kansas State. This game, if you're in a rush, could be over in about 2:55. They could get this thing in because both of these teams like to run the clock.
Yeah, Bill Snyder may be gone, but Kansas State is still operating in a similar manner. They are third in the country in time of possession at 34 minutes per game. So you would expect, few possessions. And I like the matchup. Credit to Navy for the turnaround this year. Their defense, Kenny Amatololo made some staff changes. Their defense had a pretty nice turnaround. They did give up 41 in their last game, but they're 9-2 after that, kind of an anomaly of a year last year where they really struggled, won only 3 games. And how about Malcolm Perry, the quarterback, who is 5th in the nation in rushing yards per game?
Yeah, sort of snuck up on everybody.
Carries, 1,500 yards, 19 touchdowns. Yeah. So, Kansas State, I think they beat Oklahoma this year. Pretty good team. Did slightly exceed expectations, I think you could say, given that they beat Oklahoma. And Navy certainly had a nice comeback. So I like this matchup too. I think this could be a pretty fun one. And as you said, if you like games that take 2 hours and 40 minutes, this is the game for you.
Yeah, and as we said, in a different way, but similar to Arizona State in that, it feels like Chris Kleiman has brought back the good stuff of whereas Bill Snyder seemed to be losing his fastball a little bit, and the program seemed to be on decline. Kleiman seems to be just the next generation of Bill Snyder. Comes in there in his first year, they were already sort of back a little bit. They improved over last year, and you could see how this could end up being like vintage Kansas State in another year. It's almost like Snyder, had a rebirth. So I think that's pretty cool, and it seemed like a good fit when they did it, and the early returns are it is a good fit. The Nova Holmes Arizona Bowl is Wyoming versus Georgia State in Tucson. Take it away, Matt.
It's going to have a huge crowd, I'm sure, right?
Yeah.
Georgia State, they started this year by beating Tennessee and end up 7-5. Sean Elliott, they had a downturn last year and won 2 games, but 2 of his first 3 years have been 7-5 seasons, and this is a very young program still. So this is their first time in a bowl game that is not the Cure Bowl.
Mm-hmm. Oh yes, yeah, and again beat Tennessee to start the year too.
Yeah. So beat Tennessee, solid year, 7 wins. Wyoming also started the year with a big win against an SEC team as well. They started the year by beating Missouri. And so I think Wyoming is probably a slightly better team, but I haven't seen a ton of either team since those big wins. So I think Wyoming is probably the better team. They play in the tougher conference, so I would take Wyoming to win this game. But, hey, 2 teams that beat SEC teams playing in the Arizona Bowl.
So this is an example of why the Pac-12 needs better bowl tie-ins and is not operating as efficiently and as at a high level as the other Power 5 conferences. So the second best Pac-12 team, Utah, which was 1 victory away from possibly making the playoff, has now been docked to the Alamo Bowl, which is not a bad bowl. But when your second best team is landing in the Alamo Bowl, you probably have to wonder what's going on with your conference. Utah versus a Texas team, which is trying to avoid being 7-6 in Tom Herman's 3rd year.
This is like Utah reminds me of Kansas State in 1998. Had a chance conference title weekend to play for the BCS title, yep. And then they blew it against Texas A&M. Had their shot, and then they plummeted from the BCS championship game to the Alamo Bowl against Purdue. And now you have Utah, which, unlike Kansas State that year was unbeaten until the conference championship game. Utah had a loss, but then they take that second loss, and they plummet all the way down. And before the year, it would have been like, hey, this sounds pretty good, a matchup against Texas. But Texas, for me, the most disappointing team in the country because I mistakenly bought in, never again. Until they prove me wrong, I'm not doing it again. Certainly a very, very, very disappointing year for Texas and a big game for Texas because you really need a win against a team like Utah, I feel like, to get some positivity going again for the Longhorns.
Yeah, that shouldn't be a situation where Texas gets dominated, right? Texas shouldn't get dominated in a bowl game by Utah, but you also have this sense that, if Utah really shows up and is looking to play, and their guys, because Utah's got, listen, I know Utah's showing on Friday night was not great, and it led to everybody to sort of point and say, see, we told you so, but there's a bunch of guys on that team that are going to be in the NFL next year that are going to get drafted, and if they all show up and are ready to play and want to play, it could be a very, very long night for Texas. On January 1st, well, we may have to talk about this one for a little bit. The Citrus Bowl is Michigan against Alabama. And when we talk about who's going to show up, to me, one of the most interesting stories of the bowl season is who shows up for Alabama, who's going to play in this game for Alabama. Because Alabama has been running a program there where you play in the playoff. A week after the playoff, we announce which juniors are leaving for the NFL. It's a very structured situation. Alabama is not in the playoff this year. So who knows who's going to show up? Who knows when they're going to show up and when they're going to say, I'm going to bail and not play in this game? Because there's about a dozen guys probably on Alabama who might not, who might be drafted next year. So all of those guys are going to have to say, do we want to play against Michigan in a bowl game?
I would, I wouldn't expect some like mass exodus of players here. Talking to my colleague at The Athletic, Aaron Suttles, who is pretty plugged in at Alabama, he thinks there could be fewer guys who skip than maybe people assume. There probably will be a couple, but wouldn't be surprised if some of the guys you'd expect to skip do play. So will be an interesting storyline to watch for Alabama. But yeah, it is unfamiliar territory. It's kind of crazy that this is like the best decade of football like any college football team has ever had. And it starts and ends in the Citrus Bowl, or the Capital. 2010, they played the Capital One Bowl at the time against Michigan State and just absolutely destroyed the Spartans. Like, it was an embarrassment. What'll happen here? Can Michigan do better than Michigan State did 10 years ago? Maybe it depends how many Alabama players play. But, yeah, you couldn't ask for a more intriguing Citrus Bowl, I don't think.
It is, and it's also because of the backdrop of everything that's gone on with Michigan. Yes. And the idea if they could get to 10-3 and beat Alabama. I know Alabama fans will always remember, hey, we didn't have X guy, we didn't have Y, we didn't have this, we didn't have that. But you could also see a situation where Michigan will be able to say, we beat Alabama. Right?
What if the opposite happens? What if a bunch of Alabama players sit out and Alabama still wins?
Oh, and that's fascinating too, right? Because then we crank up the Harbaugh hate machine again, yeah. and Feinbaum will have 3 weeks worth of content, just off-season content, just on Alabama beating Michigan with 2/3 of its All-Americans sitting out. Like, there's so much going on here, backstory between Harbaugh and the Alabama dynasty, who plays, all those things, that no matter the result, there will be just a wealth of talking points that come of
that
it.
Is correct.
That will all be completely overblown, right? That will all be completely
almost
overblown.
Certain.
Yes. Like, the reality is both of these teams could be a shell of themselves playing in this game, but the result will be hailed as something that is probably not exactly what it is.
I think this is like one of those week one games where we've been starved for football the entire year, and then one game we just blow completely out of proportion and give way too much meaning to. That will absolutely be this game in terms of bowl games.
Okay, I'm fascinated by this game, though I suspect it might be the one that gets used as, hey, we told you the Big Ten was overrated. It's the Outback Bowl. It's Minnesota against Auburn. Minnesota's had a very good year, and they had a great win against Penn State. I also look at Minnesota and sort of think, like, they have gotten out over their skis, right? Their ski-yuma. They probably would have been better off not being in as good a game and facing a lesser opponent, because when they got to play Wisconsin, they got crushed. And when they went on the road to Iowa, they had some issues and they couldn't win there. So basically, they played 3 tough teams. They went 1-2 in those games and sort of held on to beat Penn State in a frenzied atmosphere. And Auburn is just the opposite. Auburn played a really tough schedule, is probably one of the top 15 teams in the country, no doubt, but lost a bunch of close games or relatively close games to very good teams. I suspect here that this matchup won't go well for Minnesota, but then again, you never know who sits out for Auburn, and Minnesota is going to be really pumped up to be in this game, so maybe that swings things Minnesota's way.
Yeah, I would expect Auburn to win, but it won't be like last year when Auburn beat a Big Ten West team 63-14 in the Music City Bowl against Purdue.
I don't
Minnesota
think
is
so.
a better team than Purdue last year.
I'd like to hope so.
So, Minnesota's they have really good receivers. Tanner Morgan's had a great year at quarterback. They can run the ball. They have players on offense. And so it is kind of an intriguing matchup against that Auburn defense. I do anticipate that Auburn's just a little deeper. And hey, maybe, it's not like Auburn's offense has been spectacular this year, but I do think Auburn will win the game and control it.
Yeah, that's what you kind of, if you're a Minnesota fan, I think you're probably looking at like, hey, our guys will just be really stoked to be in this game. Auburn's got some offensive efficiencies that allows us to be in a position to sort of like stay in this game, right? That's where, and once it's a fourth quarter game, maybe we pull it out at the end. But again, it strikes me as that game where everybody just sort of pounds on the Big Ten. The Rose Bowl is a pretty good game. Oregon against Wisconsin. Both of these teams have lost twice. Oregon finished the season with a flourish against Utah, winning the Pac-12 championship game. Wisconsin has lost 3 times, twice to Ohio State, and of course that inexplicable loss to Illinois. I still think I look at Wisconsin and see that Illinois loss the way I would see the Georgia's loss to South Carolina. It was kind of fluky. Wisconsin is clearly a top 10 or 15 team. And we'll see what happens with Oregon. It'll be the last game, most likely. I'm sure he'll play because of the way his career has gone about for Justin Herbert, the Oregon quarterback. Looks like a pretty good Rose Bowl.
Yeah, Justin Herbert with very much a showcase game for the NFL draft. Like, it's just, again, one game doesn't say everything, but when everybody's going to be watching, it's the Rose Bowl. It's its own time slot. It's a huge game always against a good Wisconsin defense. And Wisconsin has one of the most productive running backs in the history of college football in Jonathan Taylor. So, yeah, there's a lot to love here. It's a great matchup. If I had to make an early pick, I think I lean Wisconsin, but I think it's potentially a pretty even game. I'm really excited to see it because, after how impressive Oregon was against Utah, they've been a little uneven. They lost that game to Arizona State, but big game for Herbert, big game from Taylor. It's just a lot to like here. 2 defenses that played well most of the year too.
Sugar Bowl is Georgia back in the Sugar Bowl.
Here we go again.
Yes. And again, we'll see how motivated they are to play in this game, who's going to be playing in this game. This year, it's Baylor on the other side. I know those guys will be pumped up. Now, again, they've got some, that's a team with a fair amount of upperclassmen who have really blossomed under Matt Rule, or at least some very key upperclassmen who have blossomed under Matt Rule. But I would suspect that Baylor looks at that game as, here's where we finish our season strong, and you just wonder if Georgia is going to be into it. But as I always say, like you can't hang your bowl banner wins when you do win, and then bury your losses when you do lose. So you got to show up here, Georgia, or you're going to get buried again. So
I think they'll show up better than last year.
You do.
I think, as much as their defense was just ripped apart by Joe Burrow, pretty much everybody's defense was ripped apart by Joe Burrow. So I think I can see Baylor having a tough time scoring in this game. So I don't know. I don't think it's going to happen twice in a row to Georgia. I think Georgia rebounds and wins the Sugar Bowl, but Baylor has a knack for playing in a lot of tight games too, so maybe we'll get a good one though.
Can I ask you your thoughts on what do you think happened to Georgia's offense this year?
That is a wonderful question. It's just Jake Fromm, and it's just they don't seem to be getting open or pushing the ball downfield. It almost feels like sometimes with the JT Barrett offenses at Ohio State, it's like, here's a good veteran, accurate quarterback, but they're just not getting the ball downfield at all. It's like, what is happening? So there does seem to need to be some offensive philosophy changes at Georgia. It seems, I think everybody could probably agree about that right now.
Yeah, it's been a little bit of a strange year to see. Again, I hate to lay it all on Fromm. It's always so easy to do that with the quarterbacks. But when you watch him, there definitely seems to be something off with him. But there seems to be other culprits there, whether it's coaching or receivers or even to a certain degree protection. I mean, quite frankly, they have a lot of talent on that offensive line. I remember talking to one SEC assistant coach, and he was like, little overrated. He's like, listen, they're NFL guys. There's enough NFL guys on that line. but they've also had some injuries and they've shuffled some things around, and he felt like they were maybe not as dominant, especially in the middle of the line, as you would have expected for a team that was considered like the best offensive line in the country.
Yeah, and from first 2 years, nine yards per pass attempt both years. This year, down to 7.4. That's a pretty steep drop-off.
Yeah, and the completion percentage, too, went way, way down. The next one on January 2nd. We go to January 2nd, and we're in the Birmingham Bowl, the Ticket Smarter Birmingham Bowl. That's an interesting one. And yet again, one of these deals where it's a really good AAC team in Cincinnati, which won 10 games, and it's sort of getting shipped off to face, bottom-tier ACC team, Boston College, who is in the middle of a coaching change. A.J. Dillon on Boston College probably deserves better for what I'm sure will be his final game. But BC and Cincinnati, what you got there?
Yeah, it's Cincinnati. Can you deal with that disappointment of it's kind of remarkable. Not that they were going to go to the New Year's Six. They still probably might have been edged out by Boise State, but they had a chance if they won that AAC championship game, and they plummet all the way to the Birmingham Bowl against a team that fired its coach. But interesting matchup of Cincinnati's defense against A.J. Dillon, assuming he plays. So I am intrigued by that. Cincinnati had a chance to, I don't know, they're certainly going to be, you feel like, a favorite in the American again next year. Luke Fickell, you think, will continue to be a popular head coaching candidate at various places. I think I do like Cincinnati to win this game. You don't really know too much what to expect from BC after firing Adazio, another just extremely kind of mediocre season. But A.J. Dillon is a fantastic running back that you're right, probably deserves more, especially if he's going out with this game.
The other game that was affected by the SEC's little internal squabble about where its mediocre teams were going to play in the bowl season is Tennessee going to the Gator Bowl, the Tax Slayer Bowl, to play Indiana. Which, great for Indiana. Indiana won 8 games, right?
That's correct.
8-4 Indiana in a bowl game, got ranked for a hot second there. And also, you know what? Good job by Tennessee.
Yes.
because we buried Tennessee. They looked like another one that looked like a hot mess early in the season, losing to Georgia State. And Jeremy Pruitt very simply got that team better. As the season went along, that team got better. They weren't just beating up on bad teams. They legitimately got better because, hey, they were losing to some bad teams early in the year. So, good job by both of these teams. 2 programs with a lot of hope, and generally speaking, that usually produces good bowl games.
Yeah, in Tennessee, they started 1-4. They got just destroyed by Florida, destroyed by Georgia ultimately, and they turned it around. They've won 5 games in a row, and nobody thought they'd be in a bowl game at mid-season when it just looked like dire. And we're talking about Jeremy Pruitt being one of those year 2 hot seat guys. So pretty remarkable turnaround. And Indiana, give them credit. Their wins aren't necessarily the highest quality, but it's Indiana. Beating anybody, historically speaking, is good for Indiana. Stringing together wins, getting to a bowl game, which they have not done much. They have not won 8 games. This is their first time winning 8 games since 1993. And this could be their first time winning 9 games since 1967.
Wow.
So a lot on the line for Indiana in terms of historically how they've been. So should actually be a pretty good game here. I think the way Tennessee's played, I would pick the Vols. More talent, but I do anticipate a pretty good game.
Now, again, because the national championship game is on January 13th, ESPN had some time to fill in between those games.
Correct.
So you have January 3rd, the Potato Bowl in Idaho, Ohio, and I'm just going to rattle them all off at once here. The Idaho Potato Bowl, Ohio and Nevada. It's January 4th, Lockheed Martin Armed Forces Bowl, Southern Miss and Tulane. The Lending Tree Bowl on January 6th, formerly the Mobile Bowl, Louisiana and Miami of Ohio. So a bunch of G5 teams to hold you over until the national championship game is played. Among that little group there, anything interesting stand out?
Tulane was a team that I had high hopes for, and they kind of fizzled down the stretch. So I'm interested to see how they respond in the bowl game. And I will say, I'll point out Louisiana Lafayette, who plays Miami in the Mobile, Alabama Bowl. Really, really, really strong season for Billy Napier. They're 10-3. They lost to App State twice. It looked like they were going to get blown out by App State, in the Sun Belt Championship game. They ended up losing that 45-38. Also lost them early in the regular season. They also lost to Mississippi State by 10. But 10-3, no losses by more than 10 points. And all of their wins, except for the Louisiana Monroe game, where Louisiana Monroe missed a field goal at the end. Every other one of their wins, 9 of their wins were by double digits. So they had a really quietly strong season for the Raging Cajuns. I'd expect them to probably finish strong here too.
A couple of little themes here if you're putting together your bowl pools and confidence pools and things like that. Generally speaking, I think you want to stay away from MAC teams throughout this bowl season because the MAC was particularly, again, sometimes it's not about the conferences, it's more about the matchups. But I do think you probably want to be a little leery about the MAC teams.
Yeah.
And if you can, try to find teams that are really, really stoked to be there as opposed to the ones that maybe aren't quite so thrilled to be there. We talked about the idea if you could, and we'll wrap it up with this. If there was a way you could sort of make the bowls better, do you have anything in particular that comes to mind here?
I think it's just, we already do see ESPN, which, controls a lot of the bowl matchups, like making some trades and things like that. It's just, I feel like some looser tie-ins would benefit the bowl games and to create more flexibility to make some better matchups. It's almost like you need I don't know if we need more selection committees, but you need something to like, hey, let's get these two teams together and put them in a bowl game, even though conferences aren't necessarily tied to them. So I think the tie-ins make it a little too rigid in some respects that deprive us of some matchups that could be more appealing. I think that's probably the biggest thing. My answer is certainly not eliminate bowls. I think there's never too many bowls, as I will always say. So even though we've said this isn't the best bowl slate we've seen, again, I will still probably watch every game.
Matt Brown from The Athletic, we did some things today. I really appreciate you taking so much time to dig into every bowl game except the playoff. We covered them all for you, a little tidbit here, a little tidbit there. Again, Matt, appreciate your time. Have a great holiday season. Hopefully, we will run across each other in person at some point in the relatively near future, and appreciate you previewing all the bowls with us here on the AP Top 25 College Football Podcast.
Absolutely. Love to do it. Thanks for having me, Ralph.
And now 3 and out. First down. The BC vacancy could be filled any moment now. As of this recording, it has not. But when it does, all the Power 5 coaching vacancies will have been filled. Maybe the NFL will restart the carousel by plucking a coach or two away from college. Hard to tell the prospects of that. Lincoln Riley is a guy who NFL teams like for his creative offense, but he might have a better job than most NFL jobs at Oklahoma. I've always thought Brian Kelly would like to give the NFL a try, and 10 years is a really long time to be at Notre Dame, but he has the Irish in a really good spot, and he has learned that taking just any NFL job is a good way to be fired in 2 or 3 years. Maybe keep an eye on the Panthers' position when they start looking for a replacement for Ron Rivera, possibly Kelly landing there, or at least giving him a look. The New York Giants are a franchise that tends to provide security and stability, though that hasn't been the case in recent years. Matt Rule of Baylor worked there before he took the Temple job. Conventional wisdom on Rule is he probably won't leave Baylor for another college job unless it's Penn State or Notre Dame. But the right NFL job might be too good to pass up. Second down. So I got mix of raves and roasting on Twitter when I pointed out that when you see these Power 5 openings going to coaches who lack much of a track record, it helps explain why USC stood pat with Clay Helton. I'm not endorsing or condemning what USC did as far as retaining Helton. And I get that the $60 million it would have taken to get rid of Helton and his staff and bring in a new coach and a staff might be a bargain if you look at what could happen to donations and ticket sales bottoming out at USC for next year. I know the math. But I also think if USC didn't love the idea of getting Urban Meyer, or maybe Meyer didn't like the idea of going to USC, then USC was looking at a search that provided no certainty at all of an upgrade to Clay Helton or stability. It's very simple. Schools do not want to do coaching searches. They are costly. They often provide negative publicity when you are turned down by a candidate. The pool of truly available coaches has shrunk. There is good money to be made everywhere, and established winners are less likely than ever to leave their established programs to take over something that needs building. Hiring a new football coach is a trust fall, and schools pay tens of millions of dollars to find out if they will be caught or if they will land with a thud. For example, Missouri is about to pay $4 million a year to Eli Drinkwitz, who spent one season as head coach of a team that was favored to win its conference before he ever stepped foot on campus. I have heard so many positive things about Drinkwitz, but folks, that's a little nuts, isn't it? Third down. Heisman finalists are being announced in just a few hours after I record this, but the news is basically who gets to hang out with Joe Burrow in New York for a day. Quantifying the largest Heisman landslides can be a little tricky because the total number of voters has changed through the years. It has been more consistent recently. The best way to do it is by percentage of possible points received. In 2006, Troy Smith of Ohio State received 91.6% of the possible points he could have received if everyone voted him number one. Marcus Mariota was second on that list in 2014. Cam Newton's win in 2010 is up, along with Jameis Winston in 2013 and Lamar Jackson in 2016. The recency is notable. I think there are two things going on. One is we tend to anoint the winner, and the voters go along with that. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It's hard to make an argument against guys like Burrow this year. He is having a historic season. He should win the Heisman. But I also think that past voters were a little more provincial and didn't necessarily feel pressure to conform their votes. It's weird. I certainly want the best player to win the award, but I wouldn't mind if more folks felt like they could feel free to spread their votes around, especially if the Heisman is going to have more than 900 voters. That's the show for today. I'd like to thank my producer, Warren Levinson, for making me sound good. You can find us on Westwood One Podcast, Apple Podcasts. Please subscribe so you do not miss an episode. I'm Ralph Russo from the Associated Press. Thanks for listening, and come back for more next week of the AP Top 25 College Football Podcast.
This podcast is presented by Regions Bank. You're chasing your goals, and it's up to you how you want to get there. Let Regions Bank coach you with financial tips that fit your everyday grind. Visit regions.com/next-step to learn more. Regions, member FDIC.